Hello viewers, welcome back. This is Literary Goa, the program which looks at authors and writers from Goa. Today we have with us a number of books and their author, who is Dr. Fatima da Silva Gracias. It's a work, she spent a lot of time doing work on the world of history, and she'll talk to us about her books today. Dr. Fatima, you said you've been in history for donkey's years.
Yes.
How
At
many years
least
exactly?
From history, I was teaching history from 1975.
Yeah.
But research in history, I began in 1987.
Out of that, seven books, that's
From
a lot.
87, I completed my doctoral thesis in 92. And after that, I published my first book, a revised version of my doctoral thesis on health and hygiene in colonial Goa.
Health and hygiene in colonial
Yeah.
Goa. 1510 to 1961.
Yeah, the entire colonial period.
Brief introduction.
Yeah, it covers the health and hygiene of Goa, starting with the Portuguese period, starting with the arrival of the Portugal or Portuguese, or the Portuguese, and ended with the 1961 end of Portuguese era in Goa.
So there is this feeling that at certain points Goa was an unhealthy place. Even the colonial capital, Old Goa, was shifted because of health grounds.
Yeah. It was a very unhealthy place. A number of diseases prevailed. There were constant epidemics until the 19th century.
But at the same time, we had some of the earliest hospitals in Asia.
Yes.
We had, plant medicines being studied here and taken to Europe. So how do you kind of look at these two contrary trends? A lot of research going on, a lot of talent, and also a lot of ill health.
Yeah, the research started with the coming of the Portuguese. So they conducted research because many of the diseases were new to them, like cholera, smallpox, and things like that, which they didn't know how to deal with. In fact, they made use of the local people, and they learned from them the cure for cholera and some other disease.
So when you're saying that there were positive and negative sides to this full health episode, are you suggesting that they were in different points of time, or were they were the problems of a different nature at the same time?
But you mean different epidemics sometime at the same time?
Yeah, or were there unhealthy periods in Goa? Were there periods where a lot of research was being done?
Not much research as such on plants, and yes, but not otherwise. I don't think much research was done in Goa.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's very complex and very difficult to understand because Garcia, the author,
he studied plants
and took back a lot of knowledge to Europe.
To Europe, yes. But then everybody was not into research. In fact, there was lack of doctors in Western medicine in Goa for a long time.
Goan doctors played a big role in taking medicine to places like Africa, which otherwise would have been the graveyard of the Europeans.
Yeah, the first medical school was set up in Goa with that purpose, to train doctors who could work in Goa, in Portuguese India, and also those who could serve in Africa, in Mozambique, Angola, Cape Verde, and other Portuguese colonies, as well as Macau and Timor. That was the purpose of the school that was established in Goa.
So you are one of the first, if not the first, who has done research on this topic of health in Goa, colonial Goa?
Yes, in present times, yes. Earlier, research has been done by various doctors on various subjects of topics in medicine, health in Goa, hygiene, and so on. But that was the Portuguese doctors or Goan doctors who studied in medicine in Goa.
Was it very challenging, very tough? What made you choose this subject? Was the language written in the archaic form of Portuguese?
Yes, the documents are in the archaic form of Portuguese. There is a lot of documents. There is documentation at the archives, but nothing was available like saying health and hygiene. You had to search among
dig out for the pin in the haystack.
Yeah, and sometimes you would spend days and days, weeks and weeks at the archives looking at the documents and find nothing, and you would get quite frustrated. And then suddenly you would see many things, many interesting things many interesting information.
In fact, you are working on a subject which deals with a pre-61 theme
Yeah.
in a post-61 era. So it posed its own challenges of language, of access,
Yeah.
of...
Yeah. And then when I started my my research, photocopies and things like that were not easily available. There was no digitalization, or that was not allowed. It was, and
No scanning, no digital cameras, nothing
yeah,
of that sort.
yeah, yeah.
And you're
So
working
you
in a
had to
dusty
sit,
archives.
you
And
had to sit there and write and write and write, and there was a lot of dust, and the conditions of the documents were in bad shape.
it's unhealthy.
Unhealthy again.
But did anyone think that you were doing research on an odd subject? Why are you taking? Did anyone laugh at you or dismiss your work or
I
your
don't
topic?
know.
No.
In fact, many people ask me why
I see.
I had taken this subject. My father was a medical doctor, and so medicine. They used to talk a lot. My parents used to talk a lot about medicine at home.
Benauli, no?
Benauli, but my father was in different places.
Okay.
He used to work for the government. And so there was a lot of talk about medicine, about epidemics, about old Goa, what happened in the past. My father was a man who was very much interested in history. And so, you know, it was very familiar to me, the subject, and he kept on saying there's nothing done on health and hygiene in Goa. If you are thinking of doing research, if you are thinking of doing your doctorate, then you should take up this subject. So when I went and I told Teotonio D'Souza, who was my guide, I told him that I was interested in this subject, and he said, what is there that much for a doctoral thesis? But it so happened that around the same time, Dr.
Mike Pearson
was in Goa, and he was sitting at the Xavier Library. And I was introduced to him, and we started talking, and he said, what are you planning to research in? I said, I don't know, I have not yet made up my mind, but these are the subjects I was thinking, or that this is the subject that appeals to me. He said, there is plenty.
I see.
There is plenty at the Go archives. There is plenty. You might find things at other places as well, but at the Go archives you will find plenty of material, he says. Go, there is lots, there is enough for a doctoral thesis.
The foreigners know our history better than we know it ourselves.
Yeah, because he was researching for that. He was
very
reading,
knowledgeable.
Yeah, very knowledgeable. He was reading on different topics and things. So he came across material.
Dr. Fatima, you mentioned some names which I want to get back to. Xavier Center of Historical Research was a very young institution just being set up when your career was starting. Teotonio D'Souza, who passed away, for that time formerly Father Teo, was one of the big mentors of your era. Could you say a few things about them?
Yeah, he was very good as a guide, well read, knowledgeable.
Very strict.
Very a taskmaster.
Taskmaster.
Yeah, he was a taskmaster. He wanted, he really made us work.
And XCHR was very young, no? When you were 80s?
I think it started in 1979. No, I started my research in 1987.
But by the time it shifted to Porvorim.
Yeah, I started my research when it moved to Porvorim. The institution moved to Porvorim.
Very interesting how you got into the subject and how you got into this field. We'll come back to the issue of history in Goa later. But the book I liked best was Cucina de Goa. You know, maybe because I had a small,
you were involved.
No, a small role to play in it. But I really found it fascinating. It's a history of Goan food, the connections with all over the globe. Such a small part of the world, Goa, is connected with different parts of the world. Can you give us some insight into which parts of the world? Because it's not only Portugal, which is obvious. It's Arabia, it's Far East Asia, it's Africa, it's Latin America, Brazil, and
all over the place practically.
Plants from Mexico. And
from the New World, plants from the New World, from Brazil, from Mexico, from let's say from South America. Plants from South America, fruits from South America, fruit-bearing plants from South America. A whole lot of things came from there. Things came from Africa. You know, there's so much. Some months back, I was in Mozambique, and I visited this island, Ilha de Mozambique, which was the first capital of Mozambique. And there I found so many things in common, food-wise, with Goa.
I see.
Yeah.
I was passing through Malaysia and I found dodol there. But it's very strange, and sometimes it's not only the plant ingredients but the recipes, the style of cooking, the names, the similarities that
Yeah.
so in that sense, you know, I think we miss the point sometimes that Goa is this very small part of the globe which is so globally connected, and
Yeah, it's a meeting point of various cultures and
meeting
various
point, clashing
cuisines.
point,
Yeah,
whatever.
yeah, various cuisines.
You mentioned somewhere about you've also studied the kind of parties, the kind of dances, the kind of weddings that they had in those days. You know, the recipes and you know, the kind of menus that people had at,
Yeah,
say, Club
yeah,
Vasco, Club
yeah,
Nacional. That's
yeah,
also in your book. Could
yeah.
you tell us, care to tell us a little bit about that?
I think I have mentioned in the book the different type of menus that they used to have for the wedding. They were set, there were cooks, special cooks, who cooked for the weddings, for important occasions, for dinners. And they met the family would go and meet them at their place, or they came to meet the families. People who were hosting the dinner or the wedding reception, and then they set the menu. It was both, it's a mix of Western and Goan.
And these menus were printed, and
Yeah,
some of them survive.
yeah, they were printed, they were kept on the table so that the people knew in advance what they were going to eat. And also they used to put tags for every dish.
I see.
Yeah.
There, I just saw this site called Memorias de Indias, and there was a card where, you know, the person, the lady, marked who she danced with every dance.
Oh,
And
I see.
there,
Oh,
Memorias de
interesting.
India on Facebook,
Oh,
it's
yeah,
there.
yeah, very
But
interesting.
Doctor, introduce us to your other work, because there's so much of it, you know, and
You know, after health and hygiene, which was my doctoral revised version of my doctoral thesis, which was published in 1994, I did a postdoctoral work on women.
hmm,
and this is my
this one,
this is my work on women, um,
this one.
which was launched in 1996. uh, Between 1996 and the first 5 years of the uh, 2000 the
Yeah.
year, I wrote several papers on women. And so I felt that this book needed to be revised, it needed to be updated. And so I came out with this book,
Very nice title, The Many Faces of Sundare,
Sundare.
Women in Goa. Nice
Yeah.
drawing. I think that's by
Harshada.
your student.
Yeah, she was my student.
Excellent portrait
Yeah,
artist.
yeah,
And
yeah. And so this is an updated version of the previous book.
in a sentence, what is your thesis of women in Goa?
I studied the women in Goa also again during the colonial period. I have discussed how it was, the conditions of women, and how the Portuguese rule helped, at least in paper, in this, to improve the conditions of women. The various customs and traditions at the time, at various times of their life, like at the time of marriage and so on. I also have discussed women and writings, or women as seen in writings, in the books, in newspapers. Then I also have discussed women and the church, the relationship between women and the church, women and law.
In a way, it's again a mixed bag, in the sense that on the one hand, on paper, women have a lot of rights, but
Yeah.
it may not be in reality.
In
They may
reality.
be disowned, or you
Yeah.
know, whatever it
Yeah.
is. And at the same time, forces like, my feeling is that forces like education and migration have uplifted the role of
Yeah.
women when it comes to Goa.
Yeah, in this book,
But they have other problems.
I have dealt with women and migration to British India, mainly to British India, and also to Africa. But and also I have dealt with women and education of women in the late 19th and early and the 20th century.
One or two works which I don't see here, I think, are the work you co-authored with Dr. Isabella Vaz on women in Home for the Aged.
Yeah, that is a project we carried out on our own, and we did a project on conditions of women, aging women, and also we visited and studied various home for the aged.
I see.
Yeah, in Goa.
That is a bit of a contentious issue because on the one hand it's good to have this support structure, but on the other hand people also feel that we as Goans tend to dump our parents in the home for the aged
Yeah.
and things like that. So
Yeah.
but in a migration oriented society this is going to happen.
I think so. It's going to happen more and more now because most of our children have migrated or are migrating for better prospects or for various other reasons, and they can't always take their parents with them, or their parents are not willing to go with them. They are not willing to move at their old age, and so they are left behind. And sometimes it may be good for them, for the parents, to be in a home rather than staying just alone. If you have no help in the house,
True.
yeah, and you are not
It's-
able to manage on your own,
It's a very hard job managing a
it's
home.
a difficult code. Sometimes I am a person who is against sending your parents to a home,
Yeah,
but there are circumstances where you can't help.
true. And managing, I mean, even managing these homes while people criticize them and say they're not well run and they are, they point to their lacunae.
Yeah,
When we have an elderly person at home, we know how difficult it is to manage one or
Yeah.
two.
yeah.
And these people have to manage like,
Yeah,
2-3
yeah,
dozen.
yeah.
And it's,
But we don't have good homes in Goa. We don't have, maybe here and there, a reasonably well cared home, but not a very nice home. The types I visited many homes in Portugal. I have
see.
visited homes in Germany.
I
I have
see.
visited homes in Austria, and you should see that. It's
True.
such a yeah. But here in Goa we don't have. But maybe also people can't afford.
Yeah, I was just going to say that
Yeah,
it
this
could be
financial problems.
it could be a structural problem. So when you're
Yeah.
trying to make the cost affordable, then you
Yeah.
have to lower standards
Yeah.
a bit.
And then you can't, even if you have to pay, say, 20,000 or 15,000 a month, it's quite difficult
True.
for some people. No?
True. And then the remaining, these
And
two,
then
okay.
I have this. This is about Santa Casa Misericórdia de Goa. It's a brotherhood which was started in Portugal the year Vasco da Gama came to India. That is 1498. And then wherever the Portuguese went, they set up the brotherhood and they set up the institution, the Holy House of Mercy. At Ribandad today, you see the gym.
Yeah, Jim.
Yeah, that was one of the places where
I
the
see.
Holy House of Mercy used to be.
The hospital, which
The
was
hospital,
earlier the
yeah.
part of the GMC,
Yeah,
and
yeah, and it was mainly set up for the Portuguese, and it's to take care of the Portuguese. It was also, beside being a brotherhood of taking care of the Portuguese and all that, it played various roles of a banker, of a money lender,
I see.
and so on. They were the executors of the will. Many Portuguese who came to India never went back. They died in India, so they would write their will. Their will, and that will had to be executed. Their land, their property, their houses had to be sold. All this work was done by Santa Casa, and then the money had to be transferred. Then sometimes they had a lot of money from these various sources waiting to be transferred, and so on and so forth. And many times Santa Casa Misericordia would lend money, moneylender would lend money to the government in times of
I see.
wars. In times of for expeditions, government was always running short of money, and Santa Casa often came to the rescue. Santa Casa also looked after the homes for
indigents.
no homes for young girls.
I see.
Homes for widows, Portuguese or of mixed marriage.
Yeah.
So they ran this home, Serra, and Santa Madalena, Maria Madalena, and all those places.
It's very interesting. I mean, you're telling us so many things which I've never heard of before or
Yeah.
would have never known. See, in Goa, we have this problem where language acts as a kind of a barrier. No? So, we people who may not know Portuguese don't have access to these kind of things.
And so, this, so everywhere they had this Santa Casa Misericordia, whether it is in Brazil, whether it is in Mozambique,
I see.
or in Cochin, they had this Santa Casa Misericordia, which did a lot of work, but it was meant only for the Portuguese or people of Portuguese descent.
So, difficult to get access to material for that?
At the archives, there was plenty of material, but at the Santa Casa in Ribandar and other places, there was a material, but that material disappeared, just disappeared, was taken away or whatever. And at the archives, there is material.
It's very interesting what you're saying. You mentioned about the lack of material in some places.
Yeah.
Would you agree that history in Goa is not sufficiently studied by us here?
Yes, it is. I don't know what will be the future of the history in Goa, or history of Goa, because I don't think there are many people who know the language. First of all, the Portuguese language, and people who can read at the archives. There are material, there are documents. There are plenty of documents that still need to be studied, but there are not. We don't see people interested in it.
The foreigners are more interested in our history than we are.
Yes.
And they take it very seriously.
Yeah.
So,
recently I met a girl. She's studying. The records of births and deaths, and based on that, she's doing many things. She's come from Washington University.
I see.
Yeah, these are the foreigners who are coming and who are studying our history, and our people don't seem to be interested, or they are not encouraged to do so.
What is the way ahead? What is blocking them? Is it funding? Is it prioritization of history? Or
yes, they need to be encouraged. They need to go for research. We are only depending on research we only study papers, but we don't do research. And
primary research, primary first-hand research, archive-based research.
Yeah, students are not sent to research. I know students who have done their masters, but they have never been to the archives. They don't know what is there at the archives. And then also to do research, see, abroad they give you a lot of help. You get a lot of funding. You get funding for research. You get funding to publish. You get also funding to
attend seminars.
You get funding to write.
I see.
After researching, to write, and then to publish.
It's a difficult field. It's a difficult time-consuming field.
In our country, it is not possible, maybe. And so that is one of the problems. That there's no people. Whatever research has been done today in Goa, I can say I spoke about it in Mozambique. We have done it on our own, independent. I call it independent research without any support. Any support, yes.
Which is tough.
Yeah, many of the researchers today in Goa in the field of history are doing things on their own.
In your years as a teacher, as a professor, what was the response you got from young people? Any promising cases which came up and kind of encouraged you to say that this field is good?
Not many, that's the thing. History, at certain point of time today again, there may be some people interested in history, but generally people would go and select subjects that would help them also to earn money. And history is not a subject where you can earn money or get jobs.
True. Yeah, of course, I agree with you fully. But having said that, nonetheless, it's a very important field, because if we don't know our history, we are going to repeat the mistakes.
Yeah. And it's very interesting. History of Goa is very interesting.
It's fascinating. It's fascinating.
There's so much that you
can dig and dig and dig. You never reach the end of the bottom of the barrel.
And the documents at the archive, there are documents that have never been touched.
Never been touched?
Yeah.
For how many centuries?
Studied.
I see.
Studied, I mean.
If you were to point out as interesting areas of study in history, what would they be in Goa as of now? Untouched areas.
All the history, it has to be recorded. It's going to disappear very soon. Everyday life has to be recorded, because it has to be recorded so that our future generation know about it.
Yeah, otherwise, it happens like we think that this is something that some grandfather or great-grandmother told us, and we have a vague and hazy notion. We are not even sure whether we are imagining or whether it really existed. Whereas, we always criticize the Portuguese for being our colonizers, but the credit goes to them for recording everything that they did, good, bad or indifferent.
Even today, so many researchers are coming from Portugal, and they are at the archives here and there studying our history. And I feel I'm very happy that they are doing it.
At least someone is doing it.
Yeah. But at the same time, I feel that our own people who have the background, because they have been born, brought up here, they are not taking interest.
talking about fascinating aspects of our history, tell us about your last two books, which are very well produced and deal with the world of art in that sense, Angela Trinidad and Xavier Trinidad.
Yeah, this work on Anton Xavier de Trinidad and his daughter Angela Trinidad, this work I did for Fundação Oriente.
So, Antonio Xavier is called the Rembrandt of the East, right?
Yeah,
The
Rembrandt of the East.
So, his portraits are amazing and they are on exhibition at Fundação. Some of them.
Yeah.
And it's open throughout the
year.
Throughout the year.
Yeah, they exhibited a large number of them. And
like, you know, I mean, like he tell us about the man and his work.
He was an exceptional man, a great painter. He was a professor at JJ School of Art.
1890s?
In 1890s, yes. And he was forever painting. He painted all his family. He was mainly a portrait painter, but he also did other work. He also did religious and non-religious work, mainly non-religious work. And his paintings are something beautiful.
Out of the world.
Out of the world.
His portraits particularly, no, in
Yes.
that sense. Even a simple beggar or something like that would be a character sketch.
This was
his cook.
Yeah, family cook. And
So-
he painted, and he has two paintings, two portraits of his cook.
I see.
One is at Fundação Oriente and one is with the family. This is Lady Tata.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and she died, and the painting remained with him because she died in England, and the painting remained with him. And that's how it is there now at Fundação Oriente.
Wow.
Yeah. And this is Angela. She painted in various styles. And she mainly dealt with religious paintings, but she also did other paintings in various other styles. And she had a style of her own called Trinity style.
I see.
Trinidadism.
Which involves?
Trinidadism.
I see.
Yeah. It's all done with the cubes.
I see.
Yeah.
This something like this?
Yeah, this is one.
I
This
see.
is her niece.
I see.
Yeah. And
Wow.
then all this is
Oh, wow.
yeah, in her style. This is Gerald Ford and his wife Betty Ford, and these are religious. Mainly, her
Gerard
painting-
Ford?
This is Gerald Ford, the
I see.
president of
I
the
see.
U.S.
I
Because
see.
she lived for 15 years in the U.S.
In the US.
15
Oh,
years.
wow.
Yeah.
Sometimes you can't help wondering how this tiny place in the world
Yeah.
has produced so many different things.
Yeah.
And as you are rightly pointing out, Doctor, unless we study it, we are going to forget and
Yeah.
we are going to ignore it.
Yeah.
And over time, it'll be
Yeah.
like a distant dream.
Yeah.
So I think we are really grateful to you for coming here today, spending your time with us, and telling us so many aspects of
you.
history which I was not aware of myself. And I hope that this is there's going to be much more from your pen, because people like you are depended on by all of us to take the story forward and to tell us about it. Thank you so much.
Thank you too.